Hernán Cortés could not speak a single word to Moctezuma. Moctezuma could not speak a single word back. Between the two most powerful men in the room stood one woman, La Malinche. Every threat, every promise, and every lie had to pass through her lips. She decided what Cortés heard. She decided what Moctezuma heard. She decided how both men heard it. She negotiated alliances across Mexico that within 2 years would help bring down one of the largest empires the Americas had ever produced. For the next 500 years after the fall of the Aztecs, Mexico would remember her as a traitor, the woman who chose the foreign invader over her own people. So are the accounts of La Malinche accurate? Was she the puppet master behind the destruction of the Aztecs? Or did history turn the woman who gave Cortés his voice into the woman blamed for an empire's collapse? In the year 1519, Hernán Cortés landed on the coast of what is now Mexico with a few hundred soldiers. He had not been sent to conquer an empire. His official orders were to explore, trade, and return. Cortés had other plans. He moved west along the coast, searching for gold, powerful cities, and signs of the great empire Spanish sailors had heard existed somewhere inland. Near the region of Tabasco, Cortés encountered Maya-speaking communities who had little interest in allowing armed foreigners to march through their territory. Fighting broke out. The Spanish had steel weapons, guns, horses, and armor. The local warriors had numbers, knowledge of the land, and no reason to trust the strangers arriving from the sea. The battle was fierce enough that Cortés later turned it into one of the great victories of his expedition. Spanish cavalry charged through formations that had never seen horses used in war. Guns exploded across the battlefield. Eventually, the local forces withdrew. Their leaders returned to negotiate peace, but Cortés had a problem. His translator was a Spanish friar named Jerónimo de Aguilar, who had been shipwrecked years earlier and survived among Maya-speaking people. Aguilar spoke Spanish and Maya, but he did not speak Nahuatl, or the languages used by the other powerful peoples Cortés hoped to encounter. Eventually, a deal was reached. The local leaders brought Cortés gifts, including 20 enslaved women. One of them was a young woman the Spanish would call Doña Marina. The Nahua called her Malintzin. History would eventually call her La Malinche. Initially, Cortés had no reason to believe she would become one of the most important people in his expedition. Then someone discovered that she could speak Nahuatl, the language spoken by the Mexica and used across much of their empire. It was the language barrier preventing Cortés from pursuing his larger ambitions. Malintzin could also speak Maya. Cortés now had a chain. He spoke Spanish to Aguilar. Aguilar translated the words into Maya for Malintzin. Malintzin translated them into Nahuatl. Then the answer traveled all the way back again. 3 languages, 2 interpreters. Every sentence passing through people with different assumptions, loyalties, and reasons to change what had been said. It was painfully slow and created confusion, but within a few months, Malintzin learned Spanish. The Maya leaders did not know it, but they had accidentally given Cortés a voice. With it, he would negotiate his way into the Aztec Empire. Malintzin's value became apparent almost immediately. Cortés could now question merchants, envoys, local rulers, and tribute collectors. He could ask where the gold came from. He could learn which roads led inland. He could discover who ruled each city and which rulers answered to Moctezuma. More importantly, he could hear what people said when they spoke about the empire. From the coast, The Mexica Empire appeared enormous and unified. Its influence stretched across much of central Mexico. Tribute flowed toward Tenochtitlan in the form of food, cloth, feathers, cacao, precious stones, gold, and captives. But the empire was not a nation in the modern sense. It was a web of conquered cities, tributary states, political alliances, and old rivalries. Many of the people paying tribute to Moctezuma did not consider themselves Mexica. Some feared Tenochtitlan. Some hated it. Some wanted protection from neighboring enemies. Others were simply waiting for an opportunity to stop paying tribute. Malintzin did not create those divisions, but she allowed Cortés to hear them. She explained customs he did not understand. She identified political relationships invisible to the Spanish. She could tell him which rulers were offering genuine friendship, which were stalling, and which were watching to see whether the foreigners might be useful. Cortés needed her. She was not merely standing beside him on his journey. Malintzin and her voice stood beside and between every ruler Cortés encountered. And when Cortés entered Tlaxcala, Malintzin's name would become permanently tied to the conquest. When the Spanish entered Tlaxcalan territory, the Tlaxcalans did not immediately welcome them as liberators. They attacked. For days, Cortés's forces fought an enemy capable of surrounding and destroying them. Then the fighting stopped. The two sides began talking. Those conversations passed through Malintzin. The Tlaxcalans learned that Cortés intended to march against Tenochtitlan. Cortés learned that Tlaxcala had spent generations fighting the Mexica. Malintzin did not create Tlaxcala's hatred of the empire. She did not need to. She allowed Cortés to understand it, exploit it, and negotiate an alliance around it. The Tlaxcalans had their own reasons to accept. They saw armed foreigners with strange and powerful weapons who might weaken their greatest enemy. Cortés saw thousands of experienced warriors who could transform his expedition into an army. Both sides believed they could use the other. Malintzin allowed them to make that arrangement. Without her, Cortés's expedition may have ended there, and the closer the expedition moved toward Tenochtitlan, the more dangerous her voice became. By October of 1519, the combined Spanish and Tlaxcalan force approached Cholula. Cholula was one of the most sacred cities in Mesoamerica. It was home to an enormous pyramid and a powerful religious center. It was also a bitter rival of Tlaxcala. The Spanish entered the city. They were welcomed then. According to the story later told by the conquerors, Malintzin received a secret warning. An older Cholulan woman approached her privately. She claimed the city's leaders were preparing an ambush. The Spaniards would be trapped inside Cholula. The roads would be blocked. Mexica forces would arrive. Cortés and his men would be slaughtered. The woman allegedly offered to hide Malintzin and arrange a marriage for her after the Spanish were dead. Malintzin pretended to accept. Then she returned to Cortés and told him everything. Cortés summoned Cholula's nobles and warriors into the central plaza. The exits were blocked. Spanish soldiers attacked with swords, crossbows, guns, and cavalry. Tlaxcalan warriors poured into the city against an enemy they had hated for generations. People were cut down in the plaza. Buildings burned. Residents fled through streets filled with smoke and bodies. Thousands may have died. The Spanish later said Malintzin had uncovered an ambush and saved the expedition. Whether that ambush was real, exaggerated, or used as a justification for violence remains disputed. But the massacre sent a message no peaceful meeting could match. Cortés was leading a Spanish and Tlaxcalan army toward the Aztecs. Cities that failed to negotiate could be destroyed. Malintzin's tongue had once again appeared to save Cortés. And when they arrived at Tenochtitlan, she would stand between the two most powerful men on the continent and decide what each one heard. Tenochtitlan rose from Lake Texcoco. Stone causeways connected the island city to the mainland. Canals carried people and goods through neighborhoods filled with temples, gardens, palaces, markets, and homes. Its population may have exceeded that of many European capitals. At the center stood Moctezuma, ruler of the Mexica and head of an empire that demanded tribute from millions of surrounding people. Cortés entered the city with Spaniards and thousands of indigenous allies. Then Moctezuma came to meet him. Every word passed through Malintzin. The Spanish were allowed into the city. Then Cortés seized Moctezuma and held him captive inside his own capital. For a time, Malintzin's voice appeared to have accomplished the impossible. A few hundred foreigners had entered one of the largest cities in the world and taken control of its ruler. But Malintzin could not negotiate a lasting peace. The city rebelled. Moctezuma died under circumstances that remain disputed. The Mexica attacked the Spanish compound. Cortés and his men attempted to escape Tenochtitlan at night. Carrying gold across the causeways, they were discovered. Warriors attacked from canoes and rooftops. Bridges collapsed beneath the weight of men, horses, weapons, and stolen treasure. Hundreds of Spaniards and allied warriors died in the water. Some drowned beneath the gold they had tried to carry away. Cortés escaped. Malintzin remained by his side. Cortés survived because Tlaxcala remained behind him. He rebuilt his army. By the time Cortés returned, the Spanish were only one part of a much larger indigenous force made up of thousands of warriors. And while Cortés rebuilt, smallpox entered the region. It silently killed rulers, warriors, farmers, and children. It weakened Tenochtitlan before the final siege had even begun. Cortés ordered ships built and launched onto the lakes surrounding Tenochtitlan. The coalition cut the causeways. Food and fresh water stopped reaching the city. Spanish cannons and indigenous armies advanced street by street. Tenochtitlan starved. Bodies filled the canals. Buildings were demolished to prevent defenders from using them again. The city that had amazed the Spaniards was systematically broken apart. In August of 1521, the last organized resistance collapsed. Cortés had destroyed the Aztec Empire in 2 years. Malintzin had spoken his orders. Without her, he may never have negotiated the alliances that gave him an army or carried the warning that appeared to save him at Cholula. So does history remember her properly. For centuries, Malintzin's story was told largely through Spanish voices. Cortés wrote letters defending his campaign and presenting the conquest as a triumph worthy of royal recognition. Bernal Diaz wrote his account decades later, defending the soldiers who had participated. Neither man was neutral. Both benefited from describing Malintzin as loyal, willing, and devoted to the Spanish cause. A willing indigenous ally made the conquest appear more legitimate. An enslaved woman forced to assist armed invaders raised more difficult questions. But the Spaniards were not the only people who left records. Nahua scribes wrote accounts of the conquest. Indigenous artists recorded meetings, battles, speeches, alliances, and massacres in pictorial histories. The Lienzo de Tlaxcala showed the conquest from the perspective of the Spanish army's most important indigenous allies. Book 12 of the Florentine Codex preserved Nahua memories of the destruction of Tenochtitlan. These records had existed for centuries. But historians increasingly began reading them not as decoration beside the Spanish story, but as evidence capable of challenging it. That changed Malintzin. In Spanish accounts, she often appears through the words of the men who controlled her. In indigenous images, she is difficult to miss. She appears not as a hidden mistress whispering into the conqueror's ear, but as a public political figure positioned between competing powers. These records do not make her innocent. The documents agree that Cortés depended upon her. They suggest that she negotiated and interpreted political terms, rather than merely repeating conversations. That means she occupied a position almost no indigenous woman had held in a Spanish expedition. But the records cannot recover her private intentions. Malintzin left no diary. Her voice is lost to history. By the 20th century, her name had become an accusation. Malinchismo came to describe someone who preferred foreign people, products, or culture over their own. In 1950, the Mexican writer Octavio Paz gave one of the most influential modern expressions of the legend. Malintzin became a symbolic mother of the conquered nation, associated with violation, submission, and betrayal. Paz did not invent every accusation against her, but he helped give the accusation enormous cultural power. A woman who had once translated between competing rulers became the explanation for why an entire civilization had fallen. The destruction of temples, the extraction of wealth, and the construction of colonial rule could all fade behind the idea that one indigenous woman had simply given the foreigners the information they needed. In deciphering all of these accounts, there is one important clarification to make. Malintzin was not Mexican. There was no Mexican state at the time, and the Mexica were only one people among the many communities that would later become part of modern Mexico. She had been enslaved and handed to the Spanish to secure peace after a battle. It was her intelligence and mastery of language that made her valuable to Cortés. And if accounts such as those later popularized by Paz are correct, that Malintzin was actively negotiating, then it is important to remember that many of the local peoples believed they were using the Spanish to defeat the Aztecs. Malintzin may have believed the same. Ultimately, in one of history's endless ironies, her voice gave her enormous power, and yet she did not leave us her own.